Welcome to the Prestin Sexton podcast. I'm Gabriel Sexton here with my co-host, Mr. Preston DeVille, and today we're going to be talking about what is
the biggest cinematic event of the year in maybe of
last 2-3
you could say almost of all time.
Of all time?
Like, it's going to put out one of the biggest opening weeks in movie history during COVID.
Well, we'll just get right into it. Today we'll be reviewing a good Marvel movie.
Good's an understatement.
Good.
Top tier Marvel movie.
S tier, if you will.
S+.
It's smoking on top 5. Top 3 for sure.
For me, it's in the top 2, at least.
Fair enough. We'll be talking about Spider-Man No Way Home today, featuring Tom Holland, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Okay. Before we start, there are going to be a lot of spoilers in this podcast.
This is
so
true.
If you haven't seen it yet, turn away and come back later after you watch it. But I'll let Gabe come back into it.
I will just say we went and saw this last Thursday at 4 in the afternoon. We were probably one of the first people across the country to see it.
Yes, sir.
And, wow, we were blown away. I remember walking out the theater going, this is,
peak fiction.
Yeah. Like a messy hair walking out going, oh my heavens. Oh, great heavens. It was that good. It really was great. Great movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. Folks, if you haven't seen it, go see it, please.
Yes, see it. You will not believe it.
So I'll just get right into it. I think Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin might be the best comic book movie villain ever.
I mean, he definitely could make a case for it. Like, that guy's a menace.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of, like, well, who's more iconic? Thanos, like Josh Brolin as Thanos, or Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin? It's like, it's gotta be Willem Dafoe, right?
Yeah, it's definitely Willem Dafoe. It's, like, up there with, like, comic book villains. I would say he's pretty much on par with Heath Ledger's Joker at this point.
He is absolutely unhinged, and I like the part at the end where Peter Parker is about to kill him with the glider. Our Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Peter one, is about to kill him with the glider. He's just laughing at him. He's just sitting there with a big shit-eating grin on his face, laughing at him. And I think that's just absolutely maniacal.
And one twist I love that they did in this movie was they took the mask off.
Yeah.
Like, he took the mask off and broke it. It's like, yeah, Green Goblin has a mask. But Willem Dafoe is one of those characters who's very good with facial gestures in, like, looks. And it definitely added another layer to the character. Because beforehand, you just didn't see the guy's face when he was the Green Goblin. Because, there's the mask and stuff. But in this movie, there was no mask because he ended up taking and breaking the mask and had you almost thinking, like, oh, he kind of ditched the Goblin persona. And then it came back. And, yeah, like, his facial features, his mannerisms were kind of frightening at points.
Yeah, I do like the part where Aunt May takes him in and says, oh, he needs to get well. He's not well because of his mental health, which, kudos for Marvel to acknowledge mental health matters. But the coolest part is when the Sinister Six are in Happy's apartment with Aunt May and him, and Peter senses his personality shift. And I'm like, that is very accurate Spidey sense and just genuinely pretty awesome.
And can we talk about the progression of Spidey sense in the comic, in the MCU? Like, Homecoming, it was pretty much non-existent.
Yeah.
And then you had, like, Infinity War, where, like, his spider sense is finally starting to kick in.
Yeah, where he's like, something bad's happening now, and then he looks
and it's
up
like, and like, it actually, like, messed him up a little bit, because, it's like, his spider sense was telling him, like, oh, you're gonna die.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And then, so it kind of, like, his spider sense, in a way, like, betrayed him.
Sneezing his cannon.
So he was having spider, like, issues with his spider sense, or Peter Tingle.
The Peter Tingle.
And Far From Home, and he finally learns to like, just embrace it. And now in this one, it's like, I don't even know what to think of Spider Sense right now. Like, it's amazing because like when Doctor Strange, like did that trick where he puts your astral form out of your body, like the Spider Sense was still going even though Peter's like consciousness was out of his body.
Yeah, like Doctor Strange is trying to grab it from him and he's dodging like super insanely fast.
Like, I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there was enough said about that because you think about it like, well, that is amazing.
Yeah, and it's like I think they're kind of like putting Spider Sense into the terms of like magic. So I think it's almost going to be kind of like a little magic thing almost.
It's like magic and science together.
It's magic and science that's like connects all the Spider-Men in all the different different multiverses. Like it's like something that connects all three of them pretty much.
Yeah, and for those, again, spoiler alert, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are in this movie as Spider-Man. Peter 1, Peter 2. Whichever one it was, it may be Peter 3. I think
Peter 1 was Holland. Peter 2 was Garfield. Peter 3 was the OG.
Yeah, and after watching that movie, one of my takeaways was that the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was the strongest of the three. And maybe that's because of experience and age, is how they kind of put it.
I wouldn't say strongest. I would definitely say the wisest.
He did. I mean, when they first came in, he did get Andrew Garfield's, and he is stronger than Holland, so...
I still would say Holland's the strongest, just because like we've seen like their strongest feats together, and Holland by far has the most impressive one, and that's of course holding the fairy for like, even though it was only like 4 seconds, that's still the like I think it was Film Theory did a breakdown on like who's the strongest one. Film Theory, right?
Oh yeah.
Like guy who breaks down everything.
Intimate good science. Friends with Film Theory.
Yeah, it's like he did a breakdown of like their strongest feats, and that was like I think it was like 1,000,000 times like harder to do than it was like Toby's train scene.
The subway, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still not ready to say Maguire's the strongest. I would still say Holland, but I could agree with you on like the wisest.
I shouldn't say he's the most powerful Spider-Man, but I think he's the best Spider-Man, if that makes sense. He's the best one. Does that make sense?
I could kind of see what you mean.
Yeah, where it doesn't have overwhelming physical traits, but I feel like he's with it more than Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. We'll rank them later. We'll rank all the Spider-Man portrayals later. So let's like kind of go like ease our way back to the beginning and kind of just work our way through the movie. So of course the movie starts kind of like right where Far From Home ended off.
I would say exactly
the same. Mm-hmm. And it's like I kind of like how they. At the end of Far From Home, he's like, "What the f?"
Yeah.
And it like cuts off right away. I like how it kind of starts off where he's like, "What the f?" and it just like a car horn bleeps while he says it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what Marvel is like they do that now with like almost every movie it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first one I remember is Infinity War end credit scene with Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a callback to like the whole Aunt May in episode 1 when she finds out that Peter's Spider-Man, and she's like, "What the?" and it cuts off.
Yeah,
it's a callback I like.
I do like that. To begin, I thought, what is going to be the consequences of Mysterio revealing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and the whole world doesn't believe him? And I mean, I wouldn't say there's not a lot of consequences, but there's people that like him and people that don't like him, and that's
a loud minority. I think that was kind of not backing him. That was kind of against him, I would say.
Yeah, like when he goes to school and they have the 3 teachers and the one guy's like, "Well, you're a murderer." That's funny.
Yeah, you just had like, I think it was Hannibal Buress characters.
I love Hannibal Buress.
He's just like, well, he's like, you're a criminal, and the other two were like geeking out over him. They're like, oh, you're a hero.
We built you this shrine. And then it pans, and there's all of his students are basically clearing the way, filming him.
3 of like my favorite like not major characters in the MCU. Like those 3 are probably 3 of my favorites.
Yeah, the 3 teachers. You have the gym teacher, which is Hannibal Buress. The
Martin Starr, who's the like science teacher, does their like knowledge bowl type thing.
And JB Smoove, who's I think he's like a history professor, or not a professor, but a teacher.
Yeah, something like that.
Something along those lines. But
or was he like the witchcraft guy?
Oh, he was the witchcraft guy.
He's the other one who went on their like trip.
He's like, oh, it's witchcraft.
And he's like comparing everything to witchcraft, which I mean, witchcraft is in the MCU now, but still, it's
canon.
Like, I just love those 3, honestly.
I do too. And as a movie, so where's it go from there? Well, they move into Happy Hogan's apartment, and things are topsy turvy. But you get the sense him and MJ are moving closer for sure.
Yeah, like those 2, I'd have to say, the second best love interest of the 3 franchises.
Who would you say first?
Emma Stone.
Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield.
I would have to say is the best. Like those 2 definitely had the strongest relationship,
chemistry.
And I mean, all the other like love interests don't actually help when he's fighting people.
Dude, we talked
Emma Stone was like, nah, man, I'm going in.
She's like, I don't give a And Mary Jane, Kirsten Dunst.
I can't stand her.
After I rewatched a little bit of the original, the Raimi trilogy,
those 2 were
she's
so
awful.
I don't care what anyone says. Those 2 relationship were toxic.
Yeah, she was for the streets. She like legitimately was pretty awful, because she's like, oh, I don't love you, and then she goes to marry the moon guy on the moon.
My son, the astronaut.
Yeah. And then she she leaves him at the altar for Peter Parker, and then in the next movie, she's like, I don't want you now. What?
I don't want you. I want to date Harry, your best friend.
So dumb. Yeah, I didn't. After rewatching that, I'm like, yeah, she sucks. I remember I was watching, I was just looking at it. Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield are like the real life La La Land. They're like real life, because they broke up because Andrew Garfield wanted to have a family with her. Well, now she's married and has a kid. Ironic.
So on to the next part. Okay, so we talked about how they moved back into Happy Hogan's. Oh, yeah. They meet with Peter's lawyer, who happens to be the one and only Matt Murdock.
Charlie Cox,
and it's
baby.
not just Matt Murdock. It's Charlie Cox Matt Murdock.
Yeah, this is the Matt Murdock from.
It's like Hawkeye. They hinted, they now have confirmed that Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, is going to be in there. And then the same week, they pop out Charlie Cox from the Netflix series. So it's official now that they're bringing in at least some of the Netflix characters played by the same. It's like, I imagine there will be more. Like, I obviously don't see like the same guy returning as Iron Fist.
Yeah, that show was pretty bad.
Yeah, or like in Luke Cage, where they have the guy played by Mahershala Ali. I mean, that's not going to happen.
No. I actually like the guy who played Luke Cage, is Mike.
Yeah, so it's like he might come back. I would see more Jessica Drew coming back. I could see that actor.
I don't see John Bernthal as the Punisher.
Honestly, I do. I think he's one of the ones that will for sure come back. Like,
here's the hard part, though, is they're like, well, we don't want any rated R anything in the MCU. And
see, now, I think they're going to be moving away from that. Because I don't think you're going to be able to do a Deadpool movie, a Blade movie, and then potentially like a Punisher or like Mephisto movie where it's not rated R, or at least or at least PG-13. So I do think John Bernthal is going to be one of the for sure ones that comes back. Like,
I hope they don't make him MCU kind of goofy. I don't want him to be goofy.
I don't think he will. I think they're like some movies are gonna be goofy, but I don't really see Doctor Strange being the next movie being goofy.
No, I don't see that one being. That's supposed to be like a horror movie.
Yeah. So, like, just to talk about the Netflix properties, there's a few I think that are gonna be for sure coming back. Like, you got Kingpin, of course. You got Daredevil. I could see Foggy Nelson, the guy who played Foggy Nelson. I can't remember.
Like, you're thinking like all of the Daredevil characters are gonna come back.
I don't think all of them will.
Not Karen Page.
I could see the guy who plays Foggy and Karen Page coming back.
Okay.
Because, you know, those two were major.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the character for Foggy, the guy who played Foggy Nelson, will for sure be coming back. Because, I mean, he's already in other Disney Plus properties. Like, he was the guy from the Mighty Ducks, the original Mighty Ducks. You know, the slapshot guy with the hard slapshot but can't skate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he came back for the Mighty Ducks Game Changers, a Disney Plus TV show. So I could see them easily bringing him back to play Foggy Nelson and on like a Disney Plus show.
All right.
Whatever. I see Karen Page coming back. She had a pretty good character. I see John Bernthal.
I don't.
I think he comes back. I don't think you can bring Daredevil back, Charlie Cox Daredevil, and not bring the second most iconic character from the Netflix series.
Which one do you like better, the Punisher or Daredevil?
Daredevil.
I love the Punisher.
I love the Punisher, but I love Daredevil.
That's fair. So you do get that in the movie. He catches a brick, and he actually catches it before Peter does.
It's like Peter would have caught it still.
He would have caught it, yeah.
But it's like his spider sense still like sensed it, like he went up to catch it. But Daredevil, being Daredevil, just catches it out of midair, out of nowhere, and he's like, "How did you do that?" And he's like, "Well, I'm a really good lawyer."
I like that part. So that's officially. So if we had a cannon, we would light it and say canon. Daredevil, MCU canon.
Maybe. I still don't know if the Netflix show is going to be canon. Because I honestly...
I'm saying like Daredevil the character.
Yeah, Daredevil canon. The character's canon. It'll be interesting. I think they'll end up doing a soft reboot with him. Because I don't see Disney being like, oh, yeah, to catch up now on all these characters, go to our rival Netflix and catch up. It's like, I think they're ultimately going to say that whatever that whole Netflix series isn't canon. It's going to be a soft reboot with a lot of the same characters.
I could see that. I could also see them just building on what they already have.
Yeah, I just really don't see Disney going like, oh yeah, go watch Netflix to catch up on us.
Disney is the money grubber of money grubbers.
It's like, was one. And like, why would they? Why would they go? They'd send people to a rival streaming service. It's like it's different when it's Hulu because they also own Hulu, but not Netflix. Like, not Netflix.
So let's see. After that, that's when he wants to get in. He kind of needs to figure out what he wants to do. So then he goes and sees Doctor Strange, and of course, he's like, "Well, I want everyone to forget that I'm Spider-Man." Well, he doesn't understand what he just said.
Yeah, it's like they start the spell, and he's like, "Well, I want to botch this. I don't like." It's like, "Oh wait, I want everyone before it happened to forget I'm Spider-Man."
Right.
And it basically botches and since that botches the spell, which a little Easter egg in there. Strange says 6 people. Like there was 6 like changes in the spell. Well, Peter only wanted 5. So I'm going to assume that like Doctor Strange really likes Peter because I think Doctor Strange also put a little change in there himself to where he would also remember Peter Parker.
That's fair. So, of course, after that, it gets uncontrollable, and then he basically cans the whole thing and says, you're going to have to Scooby-Doo. They botch the spell, and then they have to Scooby-Doo that shit. Yeah, exactly. So then his friends So then he wants to get into the same college as his friends, which I like that aspect. They really showed the human side of Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
Peter wants to go to MIT, which is also the alma mater of his mentor. So he especially wants to get into MIT because, that's where his mentor Tony Stark went.
Right. Right. And the fact is, this is the one part I really liked about the movie is they showed a lot of what makes Spider-Man is Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And I think that's really capitalized on by Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. The whole with great power comes great response. We'll get into that in a later
We'll get into that later.
But that's just one of the many parts about this movie I liked is they showed the human side of Spider-Man, and that's what makes him Spider-Man,
So then Doctor Strange sends him on a quest to, capture all this, basically the Sinister Six. He's already caught the lizard, or the dinosaur, what they like to call him.
Yeah.
Rhys Ifans reprises his role from the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I think they all did.
Everyone did, yes.
Yep. So
Except,
they all...
I think with Rhys Ifans and the guy who plays Sandman, they didn't film in person.
Okay, well...
They recorded their lines and then they kind of digitally put them into the movie.
Okay. Well, that I would still
Which would
say
make
that.
sense because they couldn't do it because of COVID. Because they filmed during COVID.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's why I didn't really have too much... So like, well, Thomas Hayden Church isn't really in the movie. I'm like, well, that's kind of a abstract thing to say.
It's that's why he was in a Sandman form most of the time.
I didn't mind that.
Yeah, which is fine with me. It's it's not his movie. He's not the main villain.
No. I didn't have anything against that. So obviously he gets in a fight on the bridge with Doc Ock, and it's de-aged Alfred Molina.
De-aged, I think, 15 years, Alfred Molina.
I didn't even notice.
Really good.
Didn't even notice. Wasn't even in my mind.
Fights Peter. He takes Peter's nanotech, and Peter's nanotech is actually able to connect with it, which is something I found interesting.
That was a little, really...
It doesn't surprise me, though. Because...
It was a little, that's convenient.
It's you know why that doesn't surprise me?
Why?
Well, because it was Osborn tech. And, not Harry Osborn, but...
Norman
Osborn, of course, was a nanotech scientist.
Okay.
He studied a lot, he did a lot of studies in the nanotech stuff. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really surprise me that their tech would be compatible with nanotech.
It makes sense. I just thought it was a little convenient, and that's
just
a
little
nitpick where I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's a movie; things have to just kind of align just right.
Yeah, and then of course, by the end, Doc Ock is a good guy, which is a twist I actually kind of like.
They redeemed his character.
It's which makes sense because he wasn't a bad guy.
No, he wasn't before. It wasn't like Osborn who maniacal. Willem Dafoe is maniacal, but Alfred Molina's Doc Ock gets.
He was literally only a bad character because the arms were controlling his brain.
Because of Oscorp.
Yeah.
Fair.
It's he was never a bad guy. He was a guy who was brainwashed.
Yeah.
It's no different than Hawkeye in the Avengers movie. He's brainwashed. He does a lot of bad things for him that kills SHIELD agents and stuff on the helicarrier, and then he's redeemed because it's not his fault.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the same thing. And it's kind of funny because we get Doc Ock, and then you see Osborn, I think, comes in. Then you get Jamie Foxx's Electro.
Redemption.
Yeah, he was great in this movie. Jamie Foxx, I've never seen The Amazing Spider-Man. I really want to... I'll probably end up watching it at some point. But Jamie Foxx in this movie is... swagalicious, man.
Yeah, his character, I'm sorry, sucked in The Amazing Spider-Man.
Did he? I haven't seen it.
They managed to cast Jamie Foxx in a role where he has to play some nerd with no friends. It's Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx is just too cool to.
That guy is too charismatic to play a loser.
I swear we talked about it at some point, but Jamie Foxx will be one of the couple dudes in Hollywood where you'd be like, I want to have a beer with that guy. He seems like he'd be fun.
It's Jamie Foxx is literally the coolest character and one of the coolest people in the world.
He's really
You can't
cool.
have him play a nerdy loser.
And it's like, well, it's bad acting. I'm like, Jamie Foxx is just naturally a cool dude. You just can't try and stick him in a round hole when he's a square peg.
Speaking of Jamie Foxx, I'm going to kind of hop up a few scenes now near the end where he's like, well, I really thought you were going to be black. When he said that to Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, maybe there's like another black Spider-Man out there. And it's like,
Easter egg.
I was like, oh, hinting at Miles Morales.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of obvious. He's like, well, isn't there could be a black Spider-Man. I'm like, he said it! He said it!
He said the thing. I mean, Miles Morales technically does exist in the MCU already.
Yeah, because of Donald Glover is his uncle, the Prowler.
He played Aaron Davis in... He played the character Aaron Davis in Homecoming. Of course, like, whenever Peter's, like, suit was, like, identifying him, Aaron Davis, also known as another Elias, or whatever the hell you say it, also known as the Prowler. And then I think there was a deleted scene where he was talking on the phone with Miles.
Yeah, I kind of remember.
So, yeah, sorry, that. Miles, I won't be able to be there today, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, so... and the snap was able to make it to where Miles Morales would become of age to be Spider-Man.
That's fair at the same time.
It's like, all you'd have to say is, yeah, Miles didn't snap, he was 11, now he's 15, 16.
There is, believe it or not, too, I feel like there's a lot of symmetry in this movie, too, into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, I will get to it at the end. I'll talk about one of my best favorite parts in that movie. But, where are we at?
Okay, so
just get
he
to
fights.
Sandman.
He fights Doc Ock, goes back, drops Doc Ock off, of course. Ock, blah, blah, blah. They laugh at his name. They're like, what's your name?
Otto Octavius.
Dr. Otto Octavius. And they laugh. They're like, no, what's your name? Dr. Otto Octavius.
It's funny.
So then they go back. He fights more Electro because where we ended off with Sandman was that he was on good terms with Peter Parker.
Yeah.
So he actually helps Peter Parker take out Electro, and then of course Sandman finds out like, oh, you're not the Peter Parker I know. Then they kind of go at it a little bit, but get zapped and put back into the prison. He comes back, zaps the tree also, which was kind of funny.
That was funny.
Ned's like, which one's the tree? and Jamie Foxx is like, it's just a tree.
I like that. Speaking
of Ned, wow. Everyone's like, oh, he's going to be the Hobgoblin at some point. Well, we just found out that he's probably going to be what's it called? A sorcerer, because he's pretty much a natural with the magic.
Yeah, that was very neat. And at first, like, one of the thoughts that crossed my mind is somehow Doctor Strange from afar was kind of controlling things, even though he was stuck in the mirror dimension.
I was supposed to say, I don't think so. Because Doctor Strange, at the end, when Ned did some stuff and, like, it zapped a little bit, he's like, oh.
Talk to me later.
Like, he's like, oh, we might have a little sorcerer here. So
there's something coming.
When you look at it, it'd be kind of like a prodigy at some
Prodigy.
Because
English major for mom.
I was about to say, because Doctor Strange wasn't able to do that right away.
No, he struggled with that, and
for Ned to do it naturally, like, he could probably turn into a pretty powerful sorcerer.
Again, here's the thing. Well, again, we'll get to it at the end.
Yeah.
So after, of course, he goes and fights Sandman or whatever, and then he's like, well, because then his mom comes in with Norman, or has Osborn. She's like, well, he needs help, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I want to fix him. And Strange is like, well, you can't fix him. It's their lot in life to die.
Yeah, it's like, and Peter's like, well, being what the character Spider-Man is he's not going to condemn people to die.
Yeah. He's
going to want to cure them and make it so they can continue to live on. Which is, like, something I really love, because that's Spider-Man right there.
Yeah, that really is Spider-Man.
And I like how he kind of starts off when he's talking to May. It's like, oh, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, so he's kind of like doesn't have quite the responsibility of Spider-Man yet.
Because
Which we'll hop into later. So, of course, he brings Norman back to it would be, Happy's place.
Mm-hmm. He brings them all there.
He cures Doc Ock. He's starting to cure Electro. And he has the stuff ready for the Lizard and Green Goblin. Well, that's when Green Goblin's personality shifts from Norman Osborn to Green Goblin. And he gets into a big fight with him and Otto, with Spider-Man and Otto. Because Otto at this point's a good guy, he starts fighting him. Well, this is when it comes to probably the saddest part in the movie. Yeah, where during Spider-Man's one-on-one with Green Goblin kills Aunt May.
Yep. And then and as Aunt May's dying, she says, "I'll let you say you're the bigger Spider-Man guy."
Yeah, I was about to say, and while Aunt May dies in his arms, she tells him, basically taking Ben Parker's role as, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's where kind of Peter's whole character completely does a 180. It's like he still wants to cure them, but he has all this hate built up in him.
He wants to kill Osborn.
He wants to avenge Aunt May and kill Osborn. Well, and this is kind of... and this is one thing I liked, because, we haven't gotten the Uncle Ben story, and I don't think we will now.
No, I think to me, it was set up that Aunt May was his Ben Parker.
Yeah. Which is something I'm completely fine with. I know some people, I think it was, I know I was watching one thing saying that, it's like you had one of the two female characters in the movie and you killed the one. It's like, I don't really like it when people kind of break it down like that. Oh, you only had two women in this one. It's like, come on. It's like, so you'd rather have a less fleshed out character who lives than a strong character who dies?
Yeah, I think Aunt May, to be honest, to me, was both. She was his Uncle Ben of just unconditional good in the world.
Yeah, and she basically raised Peter, and she was his mother pretty much.
Mom and dad.
Yeah, pretty much his mom and dad throughout his Spider-Man years. We don't know about Ben. Ben could have been alive till he was 14. And we have no idea. He lived through pretty much his whole teenage years with just May. And for her to kind of basically die fighting for Peter, because Peter was probably going to get killed if May didn't come charging in. And May's kind of supposed to be a badass.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was a good idea to kill the character.
I think so too. I think it was necessary.
Yeah, just for Peter's growth. For Peter's growth as a character, it was almost needed. And it's I get people are like, oh, well, she could have been just terminally injured or something like that, and it could have still the same thing would happen. It's that's not the consequences, because eventually she's going to be fine. This whole movie is Peter learning to deal with the consequences of his actions.
Yeah.
And the consequences of Spider-Man, and unfortunately, that's the consequences of being a hero.
Yep. So I think that part absolutely necessary. People, you're not supposed to like it.
Yeah. It's you're gonna be almost crying watching it, or be crying. I heard people crying.
Yeah.
And I know I was tearing up.
It was sad. I'll give it that. But out of pain comes growth, and so after that we see Ned teleport Spider-Man, which it's set up to think, oh, it's Peter Parker.
It's we need to find Peter.
Yeah.
Because, Peter's away just because he just saw his aunt die, and his aunt just died in his hands, and he blames himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like, well, I was the one who wanted to save them all, blah, 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 Then I basically put May in harm's way, and she died because of it. And so, Ned's like, okay, I want to find Peter Parker, does a portal. You see like a Spider-Man in the distance. I instantly knew right away. I saw the eyes, and I'm like, okay, that's Andrew Garfield. That's Andrew Garfield. He walks in, takes the mask off, and it's like, oh, everyone in the theater, you just heard a gasp and then a cheering. Because you saw, well, there's Andrew Garfield. It's so official. You knew Andrew was in this movie, so you just knew in a couple more moments that Tobey Maguire was going to come in. And of course, Ned does the same thing. I want to find Peter Parker, does a little portal, and in comes Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, it
dressed
was cool.
as the cool
youth pastor. That was funny. So then they go and talk to him because he was at the high school.
Yeah, because
spot.
The other two Peters were like, well, where's a place that he would go to be alone?
Mm-hmm.
MJ, being a good girlfriend, would be like, oh yeah, I know where he'd go. So they go to the rooftop at the school. They kind of introduce the three Peters, and Peter's like, well, you don't know what like Toby kind of goes like, yeah, we know what you're going through, and he kind of snaps. He's like, no, you don't. And he kind of go like, well, Toby's like, well, I had Uncle Ben, who a lot similar situation, and then like Andrew kind of goes like, and I had Gwen, type thing, and then he kind of goes like, and she said to me like, with great power comes great responsibility, and they repeated it, and they're like, oh, and he's like, okay, so we are similar, like we're like, you do know what I'm going through, type thing. And of course, like Toby being the oldest and the wisest, he's like, yeah, he's just kind of the dad of the group.
This is the part I wanted to talk about where it kind of mirrors into the Spideyverse, because do you remember when they're all at the house, all the Spider people, and he was talking about like, oh, my uncle's Prowler, blah blah blah, and then I think Nick Cage's Spider-Man says, oh, rough origin story. And that's the one part I liked, is that the quintessential Spider-Man origin story has to have someone die and say, with great power comes great responsibility. And I like that it mirrored all of theirs, and it kept all the things that we saw in the other Spider-Man movies. Even though I haven't seen The Amazing Spider-Man, I would assume it kept everything in there.
Yeah, basically it's pretty much the originals.
Yeah, and the fact is...
With the origin story.
Yeah.
Peter doesn't stop a guy who ends up killing Uncle Ben.
Right. I like the fact that they kept an origin story. They kept they changed it obviously, but it's still the same.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about this, is that they show why Spider-Man is Spider-Man, not because of his power, but because of his responsibility.
Yeah, his responsibility, his mindset, his other stuff like that. And now this is when the film becomes mentally mental. Like,
yeah, it starts breaking.
Like, one of my favorite parts, they're going back to start building the stuff to cure him again. Yeah. And they're in the lab, and they're like, oh, and he's like, oh, and like Toby was like, oh, what's that? He's like, oh, this is my web shooter. And he goes like, oh, you can't do this? And he just shoots it out of his wrist, and the other two were like, oh, what the hell? Like, what, you guys can't do that? And they're like, is that coming out of you? And one of my favorite parts, it's like, this is like the perfect like example of like Marvel humor done right. And Peter's like, can you shoot it out of anywhere else? Yeah. No. Just my wrists. I do like that. But they're kind of like just geeking over like, wait, what the frick? And like Andrew's like, I had to build mine in a lab with a box of scraps.
Well, I do like the fact when they're all making the cures too. It is hinted at that Ned at some point will probably be a villain, because they both, Andrew and Toby, Spider-Man, talk about how their best friend turned out to be very evil.
And then Ned's just like, oh, I promise I'm not going to betray you, Peter. And they're like, right.
They're like, Cap. That is mad Cap.
And then, of course, you got, like, I like the hint to Spider-Man 2 where they're like, yeah, you haven't had a web block then? Like, where, like, Andrew Garfield's like, and Andrew and Tom are like, well, like, we sometimes run out of web. And he's like, oh, no, I did. it's like just like a
existential crisis.
Existential crisis. No big deal. And they're like, oh yeah, we know what you mean.
Weblog, yeah, I do like that.
I also like love all like the little hints to the past movies, you know, like and like where Toby's like, oh yeah, my back problems. Yeah. It's like Andrew's like, oh, let me crack your back.
Imagine what the theater would have sounded like if at some point Tobey Maguire would have said pizza time.
Oh my god!
At any point,
it's like, yo, we were all geeking out when Norman Osborn was like, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself.
I turned to you, I was like, he said it! He said the thing!
He said the thing.
He said it! Yeah. What is your favorite part of this movie? I can tell you what mine is.
I was about to say, honestly, my favorite parts of the movie is just the banter between the three Spider-Men.
I was going to say, where they're all kind of on the Statue of Liberty, and they're all talking, and Andrew Garfield cracks Toby's back.
And then there's like, oh yeah, and like Toby's like, oh yeah, I fought a alien black goo alien thing, and then Tom's like, oh yeah, I fought a big purple alien, and Andrew's like, he's like, oh, I want to fight an alien. I'm lame, and Toby's like, no man, you're not lame, you're awesome, you're amazing.
By the way, there was no way that was not improv. Like, that just felt too genuine, did it not?
Yeah, it kind of did. And then he's like, oh yeah, like Toby's like, you know, like, yeah, I fought a black alien with like black goo, and Tom's like, yeah, I fought a purple alien in space. And you know, Andrew says something, and Toby's like, are we just gonna not acknowledge the factor that you fought an alien in space?
It does put it in perspective of how big the MCU has gotten compared to everything else.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're often. Think about how crazy that is. If you had told people back in 2004, Spider-Man 2, that, you know, in 15 years you'd have Spider-Man fighting Thanos in space.
With Iron Man and the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Captain America.
Everyone would be like, what the frick?
What the freak?
It'd be like, what's the Guardians of the Galaxy?
It's crazy. It's honestly, like, I think we almost take it for granted how, I wouldn't say how big the MCU is, but how absolutely mind-boggling and simple it has become. It doesn't feel complicated, you know?
It's amazing how far comic book movies have came.
For sure. And it's kind of funny that it started off with Iron Man, which is arguably one of the most simplest comic book movies
Wasn't
ever.
a popular character when the movie came out.
No, but the thing is they made it real. They talked about post 9/11 terrorism and how it was a good character arc. In fact, it felt like it was in the real world.
Yeah.
It wasn't like crazy out of this world, you know?
Yeah, and it kind of sets it up to just become like super fantasy stuff. Like, oh, now there's magic. Oh, now there's galaxies and galaxies of space is full of shit. And it's like, oh, it's like it went from like a very grounded to huge in just like a few years.
Think about, I mean, granted the Eternals is an okay movie, but think about how big the world is just on that movie.
Yeah.
It's big. It's huge.
So now you have Celestials, you have shit like that.
Yeah, and I think it's great. The fight, I won't talk too much about the fight just because, no, it's a good fight. It's
just the chemistry between the three was amazing. Like, I was not expecting that good of chemistry between the three.
It really felt like Tobey Maguire's kind of like the dad of the group, whereas Andrew Garfield's kind of the older brother.
And then
Tom Holland's
Andrew's the
youngest
younger brother.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me when I watched it. And like I said, I don't think Tobey Maguire's is the strongest. But if you want to talk, and this isn't his performance, I'm just saying as a Spider-Man compared to the three,
yeah.
I think he's the best one just because he's smart. I think his powers are a little better compared to the two because he can actually shoot out of his wrist, and I think that's a good signifier of power.
We'll get back into this later.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, and then so they're on the fight scene. Anything else I want to say about the fight scene? Oh yeah, So, like, Doctor Strange is trying to hold back everyone else that knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He's trying to, like, hold them back in so they don't come in and, screw everything up that they have done at that point. And in the clouds, you can see the silhouettes of... I saw Rhino.
I saw Scorpion.
One looked like it was Scorpion. Not like the Scorpion from the MCU, like the Scorpion from... It reminded me of like the video game, Spider-Man video game.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
And then I saw a guy holding a spear who I would assume is Kraven the Hunter.
Now, who did you say was going to be the new Kraven the Hunter?
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
That's who it was. I remember.
He is going to be Kraven the Hunter in the Sonyverse. And so this is where I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the Sonyverse.
Okay.
So one thing I kind of got about this movie is that Toby, they kind of just closed his character. Like, they kind of had a good ending for his character. Andrew Garfield felt like a setup.
That did feel that way. And actually, to be honest, and it's nothing against Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, I think, fits Spider-Man a little more.
We'll get into this later.
I think he just fits a little more.
I don't think we're done seeing Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man.
I think he wants to come back.
I didn't get that vibe. Like, I don't... Like, they were kind of like, oh, no, I'm not as cool as you guys. Oh, I haven't fought aliens. Oh, I'm not that awesome. And then they added even more layers, like, oh, yeah, I stopped pulling my punches. Well, I don't think they're done with Sony. I don't think he's done with Andrew Garfield. I would not be surprised if Sony introduced Andrew Garfield to be the Spider-Man of the Sonyverse.
I think Morbius is supposed to be set in his universe.
I was about to say Morbius is going to take place in the Sonyverse. That's going to be with Venom.
But it's supposed to be set in Andrew Garfield's
Supposedly.
Spider-Man. That's what it says. I'm not sure. I can't be too sure.
It's like, I would not be surprised if we saw Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man again. So it's like, Marvel, and I think it's pretty much confirmed at this point that Tom Holland's going to have at least 3 more solo movies in the MCU.
College trilogy is what they said.
Which we'll talk about later. And, I mean, in the Morbius trailer, Spider-Man's known as, they have Spider-Man with Murderer across it. It's like, I don't think that's Tom Holland, because they're going to be in separate universes.
But Michael Keaton is in there.
I could think that could just be a variant.
Mind-boggling where we come from, isn't it?
Loki kind of set this up to where, like, the same actor could play the same character in a different universe, which I think is going to end up happening here. It's like,
but it can also be a different actor.
I was about to say, I saw graffiti in the Morbius trailer where Spider-Man, they have Spider-Man with Murderer. Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that they mentioned that Andrew Garfield's character stopped pulling his punches.
I don't think so either.
So I don't think that's a coincidence. So I think it's gonna happen at some point. I mean, it's not a coincidence that right as soon as Spider-Man 3, as this movie came out, Bring Back Amazing Spider-Man 3 was trending on Twitter.
Interesting.
So the fans want it. I think Andrew Garfield wants it.
He wouldn't come back if he didn't.
I was about to say, I think in interviews, Andrew Garfield says that he wants to come back as Spider-Man. He wants to continue playing the role. He loves the role. You can tell in his portrayal that he loves playing Spider-Man. Like, he was probably one of my favorite things in this movie. Like, I liked him more than Toby.
Can I just say the moment where he saves MJ and he actually kind of tears up is sad.
Yeah, I'm like, oh. That's like, I wanted that to happen. Like, I remember seeing that scene in the trailer, and I'm like, what would be amazing is if like, Holland kind of goes for her, something happens, like he's like snagged out of midair by someone or something like that, and or he's just out of reach. He kind of shoots the goal to web her, and Andrew Garfield swoops in and saves her, and it'd be like, oh, that'd be kind of like. And yeah,
little fanboy moment.
That happened. I was like, oh, yes, that's what I wanted.
More,
give us more Andrew.
Yeah, From what I've heard, the Amazing Spider-Man not trilogy, but Andrew Garfield was not the problem. He was a really good Spider-Man.
Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were great in it, and really nothing else was.
And that's unfortunate because, again, Jamie Foxx is a pretty big actor. He's had some pretty good movies.
According to rumors, depending if know how well No Way Home does, which is going to be amazing.
Right.
It's going to do very well.
Right.
If it reaches a certain point, I saw that there was something in Jamie Foxx's contract where he'd be getting a solo movie if Spider-Man No Way Home performs up to like a certain point.
That'd be cool. I'd like that. I like this version of Electro.
What's up with Sony though? They're like, we don't want to create superheroes. We want to do supervillains.
You know what?
Which is fine with me.
Yeah, they're going in a different direction, and I appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
And Venom, some people like it, some people don't like it. Venom's just a fun movie to watch. I haven't seen
Venom
Let There Be
1
Carnage.
2 sucks.
2 sucks? Okay. The first one I remember watching in the theater, and I'm like, this could be okay, this could be bad. I'm like, this isn't terrible. But I like this movie.
I don't think they're going to be able to set up all these characters and never have a Spider-Man. Because I don't see Tom Holland playing anything in the Sonyverse now. I think they'll bring back Andrew Garfield because 1, it'll be huge. 2, I mean, instant people will watch it just for Andrew Garfield. 3, they could do a Spider-Man movie and let the MCU do their own Spider-Man.
I think. Should we spoil the end credit scene real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you have Eddie Brock, which is actually Tom Hardy, and he gets blipped in. And again, remember the clause is that all the people that get sent in here know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. And the funny part is Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock doesn't know who Spider-Man is, but Venom does.
Yeah, and Venom kind of hints in the Venom 2 trailer that he's like, oh yeah, I'm an interdimensional being. I have knowledge that spans across multiple multiverses, blah, blah, blah. It's like,
yeah.
Ooh. And then he's like, he sees Peter on TV. He's like, he licks the TV. He's like, ooh, he looks tasty. And kind of clock stops there. And then of course he gets blipped back to the Sonyverse, but the little piece of Venom is off, and it's the end credit scene is it just moving away, and it's like, okay, so we got Venom in the MCU now.
And the other thing is Eddie Brock has not been introduced in the MCU's Eddie Brock, not Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Which I would like to see if Tom Hardy wanted to be Venom in the MCU.
I still think it's very possible.
I can still see him at some point facing off against Andrew Garfield's.
I think honestly, I'm going to say this is my prediction for Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock will continue to be a huge staple in the Sonyverse. Mm-hmm. And with Michael Keaton playing a variant in the Sonyverse, why can't Eddie Brock play a variant in the MCU and just play both?
Nothing's stopping him.
And I don't see a recast happening when there's another Venom already.
I would be kind of pissed if they did.
It's like I could see him bringing in Eddie Brock.
I could see
him bringing in Tom Hardy to play Eddie Brock in the MCU also.
That's what I'm saying is the fact that there is no Eddie Brock yet in the MCU.
This is one great thing about Loki being a TV show is that they introduce variants and that
possibilities are kind of endless.
Possibilities are endless,
Who do you think would make a great Venom? Not Topher Grace.
One thing I think they're going to set up is the MCU's Flash Thompson being Agent Venom, which I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know. I think Flash Thompson is a little more...
He doesn't seem like an Agent Venom type thing.
No, and...
He's kind of a clout chaser.
yeah, and that's where I don't want to see that.
But that's just the thing. Like, for all we know, he could take over like Ned or someone too. We don't know.
Yeah, and Ned's set up to be a supervillain. And also, here's the thing, is that though Doctor Strange doesn't know who Peter Parker is, he still remembers that Ned has powers or capabilities.
Yeah, it's like in... Like, the only... Like, do you think like one thing I saw on TikTok was, do you think Peter had to get a new suit because Edith didn't recognize Peter? Like the suit AI?
That's very possible.
Like he's no longer programmed into there.
Well, one of the clauses is that everyone on Earth forgets who Peter Parker is. Nick Fury knows who Peter Parker is.
Earth.
Yeah, and he's off-world. They said that he's been off-world for a year.
It's like, so there's still MCU characters who know who Peter is. It's like you got the Guardians of the Galaxy, remember Peter?
Captain Marvel
knows
Nick
Peter.
Fury
Nick Fury
will be prominent.
Maybe the woman from WandaVision. I can't remember her name. Captain Marvel's friend's daughter.
Oh,
Monica Rambeau.
No, she wasn't.
Might know who he is because she's a high-ranking S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. That's probably knows who he is.
But is she off-world?
I think so. Because WandaVision, at the end, Nick Fury wanted to meet with her, and Nick Fury's off-world. So she might be off-world. There's a chance Wanda, maybe, because she could be somewhere in between, in a different dimension. Thor knows, because Thor's with the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, but Thor probably isn't.
Thor doesn't care.
Yeah, Thor doesn't care.
But I think the big two are Captain Marvel and Nick Fury.
That's my thought. Boy, he really is alone. I was thinking about it now. I'm like, he's really alone.
Yeah, which is like, I'm going to say this, best ending in Marvel MCU history.
It was not what you wanted, but what you needed.
It's like, they introduce, probably going to be my new favorite suit. The classic comic book suit.
That is pretty cool.
Oh, I was loving that suit.
Having a hands-free orgasm in the seat next to me.
I just love it. They set up like, this is what Spider-Man in the comics is. A guy who's alone. He's getting a fresh start. You could no longer call him Iron Boy Jr.
Right.
I don't think you could call him that after Far From Home because he kind of was still kind of going to that Iron Boy Jr. I didn't mind, but I know a lot of people hated it. Completely fresh start. He's on his own. He has to be Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I love the scene to where he's at the donut coffee shop with Ned and MJ.
Oh yeah.
And he's gonna like introduce himself to MJ, and he's right as he's about to start, she like moves her head. You could see the Band-Aid on her head.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of like knocks him off a little bit. He's like, oh. And he realizes that like, oh, maybe these two would be better off without me. Because I don't want to put them in harm's way type thing. And that's a sacrifice Peter makes a lot in the comics.
That's the other thing I was going to say is they showed a lot of the downfall of being Spider-Man, the human side of being Peter Parker, is that you can't ever let anyone get close to you because they're always in danger. And that's a lesson I think he learned in this movie because of Aunt May dying, because of his actions, which indirectly or directly, however you want to view it, it's a lesson you gotta have.
Yeah. And yeah, I think just him seeing MJ with the Band-Aid, it's like, oh, we've been dating for like a few months, if that, and she's already been put in harm's way. It's like, so he kind of makes he sacrifices his relationships with people he cares about for their safety. It's like, I just love this ending.
It's hard not to. I love the end credit scene.
The music, oh
yeah, the score by
the
Giacchino.
score was
Michael
amazing.
The same guy that did The Incredibles. Like, great. Here's the one thing that I think Marvel's Spider-Man doesn't necessarily get right. They don't show, and this is what I really like about the Tobey Spider-Man, how much New York loves Spider-Man. But in this one, New York hates him, so I guess it does make sense.
Which makes sense, because New York doesn't really know much about him, because, he hasn't been around much as very long. And one of the first things that's blown up about him is that he's a murderer.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense now that I think about it. But that's one thing I really liked about the Tobey Spider-Man movies is that I think because of 9/11,
yeah,
they really show like New York strong, blah blah blah.
Plus, I mean, when you look at it, New York, MCU New York isn't really going to care about Spider-Man because, like, well, almost every other superhero has been in New York at some point.
Yeah, screw New York.
It's like
they got all
the
good
original,
heroes.
like the original Avengers saved New York. And
Why
like
can't
so, like
Superior
they're not
Wisconsin
gonna
get something?
they're not gonna care about Spider-Man right now because the Avengers is big there.
Why can't we get something in Superior, Wisconsin? Why can't we get some heroes there?
Because what are they gonna fight? Some drunk idiot at a bar?
No. They're gonna fight the drunk idiot at the bar.
But yeah, I think they'll dive more into New York and now with these next 3 movies because he's gonna be a grounded character now. He's not gonna be he's not gonna be connected to the Avengers. He's not gonna be connected to anyone like that. So he's gonna be strictly with New York.
It's gonna be good. It is gonna be good.
New York is getting bigger, and I love it. Like New York was already huge in the MCU, but now you got Daredevil. You're gonna have Daredevil running around. You're gonna have Kingpin controlling the whole criminal underground. I'm excited. You're gonna have him facing off against guys probably like the Scorpion, the Shocker, other like mob bosses, maybe like a Tombstone. One thing I kind of want to see is that now we've pretty much gotten every love interest that he's had in the comics. We've had the Gwen Stacy's, we've had the MJ's, but you know who we haven't had? Felicia.
Oh, the Black Cat.
The Black Cat. And I kind of want to see Felicia as the Black Cat. I think it would be like a perfect opportunity to introduce him into like the college years because she's usually like, you know, the Peter Parker's love interest when it's like a darker comics. And I think these next few will be the more darker comics because, you know, he'll be alone.
You know who's my dream casting for Black Cat?
Who?
Doja Cat.
Stop.
No, I'm serious.
I want to see
I think she'd be great.
I kind of want to see the one lady from the Queen's Gambit.
Oh, Anya Taylor-Joy. No, I want to see Doja Cat.
Bro, stop.
No, because Black Cat has confidence. Like, Doja Cat exudes confidence.
Stop.
I'm serious.
Stop it.
You want to see it too.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
I really don't.
You are mad capping right now.
I really don't want to see it. I think there's better options.
He's lying. He's got his fingers crossed, folks.
I want to see Felicia as Black Cat come into the MCU because it's the only love interest we haven't gotten.
Yeah, I think they
and
do
she's
need
one
to
of the
explore
best.
that. Yeah, it would be interesting.
She was great in Spider-Man PS4.
Yeah, she's essentially Catwoman.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be interesting.
Okay, so let's hop into the next thing. Let's rate the Spider-Man. The 3 Spider-Men. Because I think we're going to have a little different rankings. And just kind of break down why you think, like, let's say...
It's really hard to rank them. Like, just in terms of performances?
Performances, comic accuracy, strengths, feats, different stuff like that.
I
Just
think
things you like things you like more about the others.
I think you got Tobey at 1. It's kind of hard, because, I mean, there's no, like, distant... You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 aren't, like, a very far 1, 2, and 3. Like, they're pretty close after this movie. Especially since Garfield's kind of got a buff.
Yeah.
Got a big buff.
Yeah.
Probably go Maguire 1, just because he feels like Grandpa Spider-Man, like the wisest.
And I was about to say, we're
Uncle Ben.
we're not ranking the portrayals just in the movie. We're talking about all 3.
All 3 of them. I'm like, yeah,
Like,
the
all the movies.
original one is goofy, and I do think it's very overrated. But you want to talk about comic book accuracy? I'm like, that's what makes it so goofy, is because it's so comic book-esque. So I think Tobey 1. You probably got Holland 2, and probably Garfield 3. And Garfield, by no means, you aren't the worst Spider-Man. You just
happen to be the 3rd Spider-Man.
You just happen to be in a bad movie, and you were the best part. Do not let this deter you, Andrew Garfield. If you're listening right
Definitely
now,
listening.
Andrew Garfield.
Okay, so my rankings is I'm going Holland 1. In my opinion, he's the best Spider-Man. Like, he's the most comic book accurate Spider-Man in terms of being like,
he's not even American.
He's a kid.
He's not even American.
Oh, stop. It's like he's a kid. Like he's actually was a kid when he first started playing Spider-Man. I think he was 17. Compared to Toby, who was like 13.
27. I think he was like 27.
Toby looked 30.
Toby was like, "Hey, high schoolers.
Hey,
Hi.
What's up, fellow kids?"
He's like, "Do you know where I can buy any drugs by chance, fellow high schoolers?"
It's like he definitely would. He was playing a 16-year-old who definitely wouldn't get carded at a bar.
Yeah.
But it's like, so I like Tom because like it's also like he's like I liked like Toby played a good Peter Parker, but I didn't really like his Spider-Man all that much. Like Spider-Man's supposed to be like when he puts the mask on, super cocky, not arrogant in a way, but like a loud, confident, stuff like that. When Toby was kind of Spider-Man, he was kind of still like reserved and stuff. Like Spider-Man in the comics is super chatty when he's fighting people. He's kind of making fun of them a little bit. It's something Garfield and Holland have done really well. It's like I've thought Holland was the best Spider-Man since I saw Civil War, if I'm being honest. Like I saw him fighting, he's a kid. He's kind of hopping around, he's catching metal arms and being like chatting up a storm while fighting, kind of geeking out about stuff. Toby's like smart in the comic and like in the movies, but I've never got the thing to like where like he could be like one of the best scientists in the world. And it's like in the comics, Spider-Man is basically has has Parker Industries, which is basically as big as Oscorp and Stark Industries. Like he becomes that big. Like I could believe that Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield's characters could be like huge scientists in the MCU or in the world, but I can't get that with Toby. Like I just get that he's really smart.
Yeah, he's really good. So
it's like
Garfield 3.
I would still have Toby at 2, Garfield 3. I just think Tom Holland, comic wise, is the most accurate. It's like, and I think that's kind of a turnoff for Toby's character. Is like, honestly, the natural webs. Like, where did that come from?
I like that. See, that's one that I like. I think that gives him strength.
It's like, because that's always been a thing in the comics is the web shooters. He develops his own web shooters and stuff like that. And it's kind of, I just find it weird that he shoots them from his wrist. Like, we've never seen that in the comics.
I like that.
Like, I just love like Peter like being able to like tinker with the webs and make like web bombs and stuff in different webbings.
That's true.
And you can't do that with Toby, so I think it's Like I'd still have Toby at 2, Andrew at 3.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Andrew doesn't make him the worst Spider-Man. It just he happened to be in the worst Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, he was too cool for the
he
role.
Actually, yeah, that's kind of hard. But he does. I think he does play a good Peter Parker.
He does. Yeah, he's really definitely my second-rated Peter Parker. Or no, I wouldn't say Peter Parker. Toby's the second best Peter Parker. Andrew's the second best like Spider-Man portrayal. Like, he's cocky. He's always like talking in the middle of his fights, like Spider-Man does.
Okay, yeah.
Like Spider-Man chats up a storm when he fights and is making jokes, cracking jokes, different stuff like that, because that's what Peter Parker is when he puts the mask on, super cocky and confident.
Yeah.
I just never got that out of Peter. It's Peter's Spider-Man portrayal.
You mean Toby's?
Or Toby's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree to that. I just think what I liked about the Tobey Maguire movies was the fact they showed a lot of the human aspect.
Yeah.
And so I think they nailed that home, whereas like the Marvel ones tend to be a little more...
So, real question now. How would you rate the Marvel movies now seeing this newest one?
Like my top 5?
Yeah, like just rate the top 5.
I think you got... From 5 up, you probably got Iron Man.
What?
Like top 5?
No, the top 5 Spider-Man movies.
Oh.
I was like, that's why I was like confused. You said you're like Iron Man, and I'm like, what?
No, I thought you meant like your top 5 Marvel movies after seeing this.
Spider-Man movies. Because I'll go first. I'll say mine first. Number 1, I'm gonna go 1 to 5. Number 1, I have a new number 1.
No Way Home.
No Way Home. Like, I'm sorry, Spider-Verse, but I just like this better.
That's fair.
Then I got Spider-Verse. Then I got Spider-Man 2. Then I have Homecoming. And then I have Spider-Man 1.
Okay.
Like, that's my ranking. I personally love Homecoming. For me, it's like one of the best coming of age movies of all time. Like, I just love it. To me, it's one of the most rewatchable Spider-Man movies.
I can agree to that. For me, I think from 5 all the way to 1, I'd go Spider-Man. No, I'd probably go Homecoming, Spider-Man 2, Far From Home, Into the Spideyverse. Number 1 would probably be No Way Home.
Okay.
And that's where I would have to put it, I think.
Yeah. No Spider-Man 3, though. Definitely not.
No, the original Spider-Man is a little
movie.
goofy going back to watch.
I love the original Spider-Man movies, besides Spider-Man 3. That's a crapshoot.
That's fair.
And it's like, I think 2 at one point was my favorite of the Spider-Man movies. Just because, like, the story is amazing. Like, he loses his powers and shit like that and has to earn them back. But now it's like, now we've had Spider-Verse and No Way Home. So that's the only reason that's not number 1 for me.
For its time, I think it was great.
Yeah, and then I just think Homecoming holds up a little bit better than the original Spider-Man. Love the original Spider-Man.
Yeah, I got nothing.
But I love
It's just a little goofy. It's kind of hard to watch them because they're a little purposefully goofy.
I was supposed to say, it's a little outdated.
I would say so. Well, how much time we got?
We're a little over the time we usually go, but have you watched any new movies this week besides Spider-Man, of course? Anything you want to talk about? Any new movies or TV shows?
I haven't watched anything new, but I will give a recommendation, sticking with our theme that we try to have. Underrated superhero movie. Go watch the X-Men. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. But I think there's a lot more gems than there are dumpster fires.
Yeah, they're not all like X-Men Origins.
X-Men Origins Wolverine's bad movie. That, if you want to compare how Andrew Garfield in Spider-Man is compared to Hugh Jackman in that movie, where you're like, Hugh Jackman is not the problem.
Nah,
He's
Hugh
not
Jackman's
the problem.
great. The
He's
movie just
great
sucks.
Wolverine. This movie's bad.
Okay, so have I seen anything new this week besides Spider-Man? Yes, I started a TV show called Kim's Convenience on Netflix, and it's great. I would recommend to anyone who just likes funny sitcoms.
Folks, we were watching it here before Spider-Man, and they're like, oh, we want to get to the theater early.
Got there an hour early. We were the only ones in the thing. So I just broke out Kim's Convenience, started watching it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm glad we could go from watching Kim's Convenience in the dorm to watching Kim's Convenience in the movie theater. What an experience.
And then my recommendation for the week, I'm going to say Interstellar.
Okay.
I watched that movie 2 weeks ago. Haven't gotten to talk about it a whole lot, but I loved it. Visually, it's great. Story-wise, it's great. It's mind-boggling. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, just go watch Interstellar.
All right. I think that's it, folks.
Oh, yeah. So, folks, make sure to, follow the podcast on Spotify. For our YouTube audience, like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video, of course. Share it with your friends. Share it both on Spotify and YouTube. We kind of want to grow this channel a little bit. Something we love doing. And, do you have any final words?
No, I think we better get studying for our comm final.
Oh, yeah, gross.
Yeah.
Well, this is Prestin Sexton, and you've made it to the end of the podcast.
Go you.